I was a real terrible student when I first started college. I mean, terrible. This is one of the things about y'all. People are like, why are you so happy about your job? People complain about students. And I'm like, look, I was the worst student in America, like 2 consecutive years, and was in the running my third year in college before I turned it around. I was dumb. If you guys ever see pictures of me, like from whenever I was like y'all's age, you'd be like, is there anything in there? Look at his eyes. It's just dim. There's no spark in there. I made the stupidest decisions. All right. I mean, that's why I think I'll never stop being impressed with you guys that are hustling, right? Because I see it and I realize that, well, first of all, I was a terrible student and I pulled it off. So the ones of you guys who are struggling right now, I see you guys. Like, I know that it's hard sometimes. And that's why I tell you guys early on, you got to have a goal or it won't make any sense to you. Because I know that because I spun my wheels like that. But I just want to demonstrate to you guys exactly how ridiculous my life is. All right. Look at this. Associate in Arts. That's my permanent student record right there. You guys notice anything? Any grade on there stand out?
He says he knows anything, highlights it.
You see that? Yeah, okay, that's me when I was y'all. The point here is that in life, you find yourself in situations and you can only move forward, right? This is what you see here is the transcript of a person that had no goal in life. And when I look back on it, it's like I had no goal and I was stupid. I had to fight myself for a long time to finally get where I needed to be. But I feel like I got there overall. I'm not recording here. But here's the point I want you guys to know, all right? I had a D in history. Now I have a PhD in history. All right? That's a swing. And it only came because I found a goal. But also, for any of you guys right here, right now, every day moving forward is just a time to get your mind right. Don't let yourself feel defeated because of things you've done in the past. It's all forward. It's all forward. You can't change anything in the past. All you can do is hustle. And when I advise students, the one thing I tell them is, I don't care what you did before this. The biggest mistake you ever made, let that just be an interesting story you tell somebody one day that they can't even believe that you would have done that because you've pushed forward so far, right? Me having a D in a class that I now teach at Middle Tennessee State University, me having that D back in the 97, 98 academic year, that story is only funny if I moved on. That story is not funny if I'm like sitting around with my buddies in the yard doing nothing and being like, yeah, man, I didn't care about college. Then it's just, you know what? It ceases to be an amusing story and it becomes just kind of who you are. So push forward, guys. All right. That's my message for the day. Let's get into this class here. All right. Before we start off, does anyone have any questions? Anyone have any questions?
So that D, did that just happen to be a D? And you're like, oh, hey, I got a D back when I was in community college. Or like, did you intentionally just not like that class or not engage in it? Like, what's the
Are you asking me if I was like, hey, I got a D in this class, look at my transcript, wouldn't it be weird if I got a PhD? No, that didn't happen because I wasn't that coherent of a planner at that point in my life, so it wouldn't even be possible for me. But overall, it's like, why didn't it happen? You want to know why it didn't happen? The main reason is because I did not invest myself in it. I didn't put the time in. That class, I thought I was getting away with something. I made terrible decisions at that time in my life. And what I ended up doing was they had a class that met 2 hours a day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but it only met for half the semester. So it was like an 8 to 10 a.m. class, and it was basically for working professionals so that they could, basically schedule that and only have to take a half a semester off. And I was like, oh, cool, man. I won't have to get up and go to class early the first half of the semester, but I had no foresight because I was operating on a reptile brain. And when you do that, what ends up happening is you get to the point where, surprise, surprise, guess what? You got to go to class now. And I just didn't go. And here's the other thing. And here's why I love my MTSU students. All right. Taught a lot of different places. By and large, you guys as a group, you guys know how to take responsibility for your actions. I'm telling you, like, there's a lot of schools that, like, if something's wrong, there's a lot of places, a lot of people in this world, if something's wrong, couldn't be them. They couldn't be the problem. And even at my worst of those times in my life, I will tell you that I knew why I got that D. I earned that D. And that's another thing about life is, I don't think I would have ever gotten past that either if I hadn't known how to take responsibility when I made a mistake, which is something to own up to. But anyway, let's move forward. Any questions about the class? Did anybody get a chance to watch the last lecture, the video of the last lecture? Anybody? Raise your hand if you saw that last lecture that I did, that I posted the video. Killian, you watched it too? You watched lecture 3? You just wanted to see what happened after that train wreck, didn't you? I don't blame you. I would like to apologize to everyone for that last lecture. I will tell you what happened just real quickly. Adobe Suite has a problem where the battery will stop charging even when it's plugged in on your computer. And my computer just died, and I wasn't aware of it. So today I am recording in the cloud. So if anything happens, we will have it saved, and I am running Adobe, but I'm also going to monitor the battery to make sure that doesn't happen. So that was a one-time thing. Also, sorry I had to shotgun that. I was like, what do I have to say? And I hope that the video of a raccoon on a bicycle, and I hope that the videos of Solomon mowing the grass in there, I hope they added a little spice to that, because I had nothing left. I was just, sometimes you just go to the closet and you go, what's in here? And you make something out of it. That's what I was doing. All right, cool. So back at it, lecture 4. We're going to get more into the colonies. Okay, so one of the big questions from last time was about colonization. Right? What are the motivations? And I just want to reiterate this. So we talk about what inspires the foundation of a colony, but there are multiple actors in anything. So the motivations for the colonies are different. The settlers have different motivations than investors. Investors have different motivations than the governments that are involved. About the government here, I'm talking about the monarchy, the government of England, particularly for the Americans. But never forget that, right? You can have a whole lot of people in the same place there for different reasons, right? Some of you guys, for example, are in college because you have a clear career goal. Some of you guys are in college because you were just always told you're going to college. Some of you guys are just in college to kind of take this class, and I really appreciate that. I got a lot of nice emails, people saying that they came to college just because I was here, and so thanks for that. All the handwritten letters, appreciate it. You guys got to stop stopping by my house, though. All right, it gets creepy after one, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, and somebody's got to haul those flowers off too. It's a task. Last time we talked about Jamestown, which was the first establishment that stuck around, founded in 1607. And for pretty much everyone involved in that, it's financial, right? I mean, this is for the crown, for the king. You get a portion of the revenue, and you get potentially control over more resources in your empire. For the investors that found it, it's a joint stock company. Multiple people can invest. That allows you to potentially have a huge reward by spreading the risk out amongst multiple people. And for the settlers, and remember, there are wealthier settlers who get there and can get the land first. Then there are people who are just absolute destitute and come over as indentured servants. For all those folks, it's about land, right? So just to clarify, that doesn't mean they don't have faith, and it doesn't mean their faith isn't important to them. It just means that if you look at the motivating factor there, for almost everyone involved, it's financial. It's about something tangible. For the Puritans, however, there is a monetary aspect for sure. The opportunity to get land matters, but for them, their whole worldview, they can't understand their narrative, right? Their narrative is steeped in this interpretation of Christianity, and what that means is that they are inspired. They are inspired here, and when they see the world, they see it through their faith. So you have both factors to some degree at play in both. But I think the reason that I picked these is because they're founded 23 years apart, but they are such complete, total different examples of the motivations that drive folks. You guys pick up on this? You guys follow me on this? Really, what I want to drive home is that this country comes from all over the place, and that there's no single origin here. And that's one of the problems that I think we have when we think about the past. When somebody pastes their view of the past, a lot of times what they say is, here is what I would like to have happened. And then they tell the story with the answer they want in mind already. It's far more complicated. And if you appreciate the complete difference between the Puritans and the folks down in Jamestown, and that these colonies come together from completely different backgrounds with almost no relationship with one another, I think you can, one, actually appreciate the American Revolution. And if you appreciate the American Revolution, I think you'll appreciate the country we live in more. And two, you'll appreciate that this country has a long history of getting people who have very different worldviews to come together and unify. And I think that's one of those stories that sometimes gets left out, especially when it seems like there are a lot of people that have a lot at stake for themselves to keep us split apart. Okay. So there we go. Let's talk about a few more colonies. I really want to drive this point home. Okay. So, all right. The best colony ever, the Carolinas. All right. I'm not just saying that. Okay. I am just saying that because I'm from North Carolina originally, but so is Tennessee. Originally, Tennessee was a part of the Carolina colony. So let's find out this history. Let's find out this family tree, if you will. This is an interesting colony because, okay, 1663, it's much later. There's a English Civil War that goes down. It's a long story. I'm not going to get into it, but basically, eventually the original crown, the original royal line comes back to the throne. King Charles II rewards a group of 8 proprietors. These are people that supported him in coming back to the throne. He's like, hey, thanks, guys. I got you a little something. It's called everything between the southern border of Virginia and down to this river here at the bottom. All right. And they're like, they don't know how far the map goes. They don't know. It's just everything between there. So 8 people get control of this colony. They want to make money off of it. And they're thinking, this goes back to something we'll talk about here in a second. They're thinking the land's getting tight in Jamestown. All of these people have been moving there. All of these indentured servants. The land is getting really, really tight. What if we just opened it up? We could offer head rights like they did. We could open up this whole colony. Surely people will move there, set up, and allow us to make our wealth. Bad news, Carolina proprietors. That's not going to happen. And the reason it's not going to happen, there's a couple actually. One is they start setting this thing up. And shortly after, Pennsylvania opens up for settlement. And guys, let me just tell you, if you know anybody in the 17th century who's thinking about doing something crazy enough as moving to an American colony, go to Philadelphia first. Go to Pennsylvania. It's got rich soil. They've got much better relationships with the natives. The climate is much more like back home in England. So it's hard to get people to come down there. On top of that, have you guys ever been to South Carolina before? Anybody here ever been to South Carolina? Anybody? It's cool. You guys came back. I'm glad you guys made it back. A lot of times when they see you reading down there, they'll put you in prison and they'll be like, no reading in South Carolina, like that. So anyway, my dad's in South Carolina right now. My aunt lives there. My family lives there. They're sweet people. It's just, you got to read things to them. Anyway, so if you go down south, if you guys have ever been like further, what does the soil look like down there close to the coast?
It's kind of grainy.
Yeah, it's grainy. It's grainy, and there's a ton of just bog down there, especially as you get in there, right? I mean, just a lot of just swampy land. So you don't have the same type of climate and the type of topography that you need to grow tobacco. So you immediately get an interesting split. The northern part of the Carolina colony is actually able to recruit some people down from Virginia because it's right there, just right across the border there. There's some similarities. People come from different places, but they're able, like basically North Carolina begins to form on the basis of the small farm system, the head right kind of thing, and generally the Virginia's founded on. But the southern portion of the colony is struggling. Nobody wants to go, if they can go anywhere else, they want to go down to the southern part of the colony. You got to think at this time, basically they're living along the coast. And the cost of transportation once you leave the coast is pretty high, unless there's a river. Even then, it's pretty high. So what you can grow down there, more or less rice. It's actually a pretty good place for growing rice because rice needs standing water, and so it turns out to be good for that. But you know what comes along with rice and standing water? Come on, y'all, a bunch of Southerners. What happens when the water pools in the backyard?
Mosquitoes.
Yes, mosquitoes. Not only that, as it turns out, the southern portion of the United States and actually on up, once mosquitoes and malaria comes to the New World, it finds a perfect environment to spread. So it is a really, really hot, rough place to live. On top of it, terrible malaria. You're just not going to go there if you can help it. So the best port in that colony was Charleston. Still was then, right? It's a natural port. Well, fairly well easily. Wait a second. Fairly easy to defend. There we go. And so basically, they're trying to figure out how to make money. And for the first portion of this colony's history, the port of Charleston, its major, the major way they make money off of it is exporting enslaved Native Americans. There are slave hunters that go in, take Native Americans, put them on boats, and send them to the Caribbean to work in the sugar plantations and things down there. It's an interesting development of history, actually, how it becomes that in the United States, Africans become the ones who are the enslaved people. But you can actually see the principles behind how this evolves here. These folks had tried to enslave Native Americans, some people had, and make them work in the New World. You can't do that. It's not going to work. They know the land better than you. They know how to get away. The surrounding populations are far more sympathetic to them than to the settlers. It's not easy. So one of the most important things, if you want to absolutely subjugate and break the soul of people, is to make sure they end up somewhere where they have no clue where they are, where they have no local allies. Better if they don't speak the language more than they need to know to do what you tell them to do, because if they start talking to people, they'll find out how to get away. They might find out where they are. And so Native Americans are enslaved and taken down to these plantations. And that's what Charleston's base is, the biggest part of their economy is for the first years of the South Carolina colony, or Carolina. They don't split till later. Interestingly enough, South Carolina, they do eventually split, and here's why. The northern parts, I said, smaller farms, kind of following that early Virginia model. But eventually the Carolina proprietors figure out how to make money off of the southern portion. It's going to be a lot of money. They find this because in the islands in the Caribbean at this point, those islands are some of the most profitable and valuable square miles of land on this planet, because the sugar plantations down there are making people mega wealthy. But they're islands, so they're small. And eventually you get to a point where, you know, if you have a plantation and you split them up, you got kids, there's not going to be enough for one person to run. So the fathers of sons in Barbados, shortly after the Carolina colonies founded, the British figure out, well, these folks actually know how to work harsh conditions. They're looking for places to send their sons so they can get land and continue this plantation legacy. And so they end up, the proprietors here in the southern part of Carolina end up recruiting plantation slave owners from Barbados to come to the southern part of the Carolina colony and establish plantations and plantation slavery. And this is the DNA of the southern part of the Carolina colony. From the very beginnings, this part of the American colonies is defined by slavery. Later on, it's going to be the first state to secede from the Union. Spoiler. Let me really drive something home to you here, because maybe your education in high school has gotten better since I was there. God, I hope it has. But I'll tell you, I didn't really learn much about slavery and how it evolved over time or the differences. But it's really important to understand these differences. There was slavery across the American colonies. I mean, some of the northern states don't even, the first state to ban slavery is after the Declaration of Independence. I mean, there's a short period in Georgia, but we'll get there. But overall, it's widespread. But there's some forms of slavery that are basically domestic help. There are some people who have small farms, or maybe have, like with the head rights or whatever, they have one person that work with them. It's a very different system than plantation slavery. The way plantation slavery works is that one person or family owns a massive tract of land, a really large tract of land. And that person doesn't work. I mean, they might do other things, but they're not out there laboring. That person essentially lives off of an army of enslaved people and is largely divorced from the daily life of those folks. It creates massive consolidation of power, both through wealth and through just political power, because ultimately, you can't have a middle class. You really can't. You can have some people that are in it. But what you have is working people who are stripped of their humanity, forbidden from learning to read and write. They don't get paid anything, so they cannot create cannot become a consumer class. The people who own the plantations, they see these people as inputs like bricks or rocks or anything else into the equation. They're not going to pay extra for things. So what you end up with is a part of the world down here from its very beginnings that is going to have a tiny portion of the people that have all the power, and a large portion of the population that is considered property, that is treated like cattle. This has implications because and just to drive this home, just to jump ahead of the Civil War, it's always very interesting to me when people say, well, it was about states' rights. Well, it's what the people wanted. You guys know that South Carolina's population in 1860 was majority black? Did you know that almost 60% of the population of Mississippi, 60% of Mississippi's population was black in 1860? Something tells me they weren't asking over half the people in those states. And ladies, sorry, y'all don't have much of a say-so either. This does not create a diversified economy. It does not create a thriving middle class. It does not put a premium on investment. Capital is not liquid. In fact, what's going to happen in the South is that the vast majority of the wealth held in Southern households that have a lot of money is going to be completely invested in human beings and land. Even taking the humanity out of it, which you should not do except for thought processes like this, even taking away the absolute horror and humanity of it, you don't have an economy that any of you guys would want to live in. It's an economy in which wealth is consolidated in a small group. It always makes me fun. It always kind of makes me chuckle to see these white kids back home where I'm from talking about wish the South had won. It's like, yeah, I don't think you do, friend. There wasn't a whole lot of room for somebody working their way up. I mean, the wealth was the land. And who do you think got the best land? You think an average guy trying to make his own farm could compete with some dude that owned thousands of acres? Nope. You think they were investing in colleges for everybody to pull their way up? No. I do not think in my life I've ever seen anybody ever be sympathetic to the Confederacy that even in the most vulgar terms that it were still here would be benefiting from it at all. All those poor white boys back home will be kept down and be told that it was a good thing that they were, because if they weren't, there wouldn't be slavery. If there weren't slavery, there'd be nobody to keep them safe from the black folks. It's an old story, man. Starts here in South Carolina. It is going to spread. It is going to define the Deep South. And in fact, it's an interesting split here that happens, because you can see North Carolina, and again, there is slavery in all these states, and there's going to be slavery in all these states, in the southern states, until you get to the 13th Amendment in 1865. But North Carolina follows a much smaller farm model. There are a lot of plantations, but there are also smallholders there. Same thing's going to be in Tennessee. But South Carolina is going to essentially export this system eventually. It's going to follow through down to Georgia. And once the territories in Mississippi and basically the Louisiana territory opens up, it is going to dig in its heels. And this is going to be at the origins of the formation of the states of Louisiana, of Mississippi, of Texas. And don't be surprised when you see those Deep South states are the first wave of secession. Again, North Carolina, Tennessee, these other states, they leave, Virginia, they leave a bit later. And I think there's definitely a historical power there. So let's get back to this. Let's get back to this. Also, it was really nice too, because once the South Carolinians left, we could start reading again in North Carolina, like we did. New York. All right, New York. And I'm going to buzz through some of these pretty quickly. I just really want you guys to get this. All right. New York. Remember I told you that guy Charles II was like giving out gifts? Remember that? I was like, oh, I gave some people this land down here in the Carolinas. Okay, cool. Well, guess what? He gave his brother a whole colony up north, New York. He was like, hey, man, here you go. Here's a colony. Now, here's the problem with this colony. Well, it's not really a problem for the English. The Dutch were there first. You guys know the Dutch? You guys know the Dutch, the Netherlands, Holland? You guys all know that? Okay, cool. Those guys were there first. Isn't it sweet? You guys see them now and you're like, they're so tall. But back then they had colonies all over the place. And the Dutch had this one, and the English were like, I think it's ours now. And the Dutch were like, no, it is ours. And then the English just showed up off the coast with their boats, and they were like, you want us to fire these? And they were like, okay, it's yours. And then they left. And the saddest part is they came back a little bit later and took it for like a couple of days, I guess just for good old time's sake. And the English ran them back out again. But this colony had already been established, basically. See, the English will take it from the people who live there, no matter who it is. Charles II gives this to his brother James, the Duke of York. By the way, shout out to the originality in naming these colonies. And I love, they're like, hey, what's your colony called? They're like, New York. Where are you from? Old York. They're just like, what? That's it. New York, New Jersey. Guess where those guys are from? Swing at it. Okay, yeah, okay. It's either just new something or just named after the king. They're like, oh, we'll call this Virginia after the Virgin Queen. Oh, we'll call this one Jamestown after King James. Oh, we'll call this one Carolina because Carol is the Latinized form of the name Charles. So a Carolina, and then we'll call this one Annapolis. That's just basically it. Very original. So New York is what they form here. Here's the best part. Charles II gives it to his brother James, which is very nice, by the way, because, some people's brothers don't give them anything when they get married, even when it's like, it was like 2013 and they were getting married and they had a nice wedding. And, some people's brothers don't even get them anything, I'm just saying, it must have been a good brother. So anyway, he gives them all this land, and Charles, and so James II, he gives away the southern portion of it to some other people. He's like, here, you can have this. And that becomes New Jersey. Guys, here's your historical legacy. Goes to show, even in the 17th century, nobody wanted New Jersey. So, see, some things don't change, actually. Like, here, you guys can have that. They were like, why? And it was like, oh, no, Snooky. She might have been around back then. I don't know. They're probably trying to banish her into the woods. They didn't work. She's still here. So what's interesting about New York is the English come in, and instead of just settling their own people that they pick, they're dealing with the fact the Dutch were already there, and they actually set up, the way the Dutch did it was they set up kind of like plantations, but not like slave plantations, more like European serfdom. And if you guys don't know how this works, basically you have peasants and you have lords. The lords own the land. The serfs work on the land and give a portion of what they make to the landlord, literally the lord of the land, and that's how they pay their rents. But they can't really own the property outright. So that's basically what's set up here. It's a system called the patroon system. The English are like, if it's making money, it's making money. So they just go along with it. They run the government out, but they let a lot of the people who'd settled under the Dutch stay there. People came from all over the world. So New York, from the very beginning, is a much more diverse colony than a lot of the other ones because of this. They also don't have an elected assembly. Basically, the people that run the place decide everything. So not really democracy there. Remember, we talked about in Jamestown, there was the House of Burgesses formed in 1619, the first legislative meeting in the American colonies. That was part of the deal. That House of Burgesses formed in 1619, that's the origins of today's Virginia legislature. Just had its 400th anniversary. So New York, very different system. And it's going to be an interesting split because the cities on the coast are going to, because of all this, cities on the coast are going to go one direction, but the people inland are going to be far more conservative when it comes to consolidated power later on. And this split goes back to this origins as a Dutch colony. Cool? Make sense? All right. We're just going to get through two more. All right. Pennsylvania. Do you guys like Quaker Oats? Who likes Quaker Oats? Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
You guys ever felt like maybe it's time to get rid of that stereotype of a Quaker on the box? Have you guys ever seen that guy? I'm not sure it's okay. All right. I don't know why breakfast gets away with it. Breakfast just rolling with it. They finally got rid of Aunt Jemima syrup, thank God. All right. People were mad because they took that Native American woman off the box of the butter that's at the breakfast table. I don't understand it. Never once did I ever taste the difference between those two. But they got the Quaker oat man. All right. Why is it okay? Why is it okay? So you guys don't care, do you? You guys don't care. You don't care a damn bit. You guys are like, get out there and whip up my peaches and cream oatmeal. I don't care how they treat this man. And he's just being peaceful. All right. So that's the Quakers. It's not the real. Let me tell you about the Quakers. Quakers are great. Peaceful people. They are also persecuted in Europe. And this kind of goes back to one of the things that's going to be important to understand moving forward. And that is that you guys' only conception of your relationship to your government, and this is a very good thing, you've only experienced your government as a citizen. When you're a citizen, the government works for you. And when the government doesn't do what you want to, you can say, no, we don't like this. You can protest. You have the right to go out in the streets. You have the right to petition government, all these things, okay? So you guys got this real lucky view of the world where you're a citizen of a democracy. But under a monarchy, you're not a citizen. You're a subject. And as such, you are subject to whatever the king or queen tells you to do. And just like the way you owe that landlord some food, that all pays up. But a big one for the king is when he tells you to go fight in a war, you better go. That's not a choice. You are subject. You owe the king. He doesn't owe you anything. You owe the king. This is why Quakers are hated in most places, because Quakers are pacifists. And if you tell them to go to war, they go, no, it's against our religion. And you guys are like, that's sweet. Yes, that's good. I'm glad you thought that. Excellent. That is sweet. You're right that they don't want to do that. That's the privilege of living in a democracy. But for monarchs, these guys are persecuted. So they finally managed to get this colony here, Pennsylvania. William Penn is the founder. It's originally formed as a destination for Quakers to go. Unlike Puritans, Quakers don't immediately get right down to replicating the persecution they faced back in Europe. Quakers actually establish a pretty thriving city there. It was Philadelphia, which you guys know. It goes back to Philos, which is Philadelphia, which is love, right? Philos is love, and Delphia, right? Delphi city. So it's city of brotherly love. How does it work? Philadelphia. Yeah. So basically, that's what it literally means. City of brotherly love. In Pennsylvania, they have amazing soil, this dark, rich soil. As I said before, great for growing things that you could grow back in Europe. They also work out far more peaceful relationships with the Native Americans. Not to say it's like equal, but they have a better relationship there. Less likely to die in an Indian war, probably. You're less likely to find yourself in a condition that you can't farm. And on top of that, you guys remember Thomas Harriot's pamphlet where he was just lying the whole time? And he was like, oh, yeah, it's great there, man. Okay, cool. That's the way life is at this time. You just didn't know. You were like, okay, man, he says it's cool. And you get there and you're like, bogs again. Like you can't help it, right? You get on a boat, you go back. Philadelphia actually, for that time, recruits people, but it does it honestly. Like it actually gives people an accurate account of what they're coming into. So for this reason, people begin flooding into this. Philadelphia is going to be the largest city in the colonies until the 19th century, once it's surpassed by New York. But it's actually a place that settlers go and find what they were expecting. And for this reason, it's going to be a pretty powerful colony. Now, another thing about Pennsylvania that's cool. When they go there to set up, remember that we talked about the House of Burgesses in Virginia. You've got in Massachusetts Bay early on, you have a theocracy where it's run by the insiders in the church. Here, the founders set up what's called the framework of government. And you don't have to know too much about it except for this one thing. At this time in history, what would happen was you would write like a government term, like here's how the government works. And it would work for a while. And then it would stop working, and there might be a revolution, there might be something, and you'd scrap it and you write a new deal. That happens a lot of places. But in William Penn's framework of government, there's a little deal where they say, how about we make it where we can amend this thing? So instead of us having to fight about everything next, like if we need to change things, we make a deal where if we all agree on it, we can make certain changes so that the document can evolve over time instead of leading to like big ruptures and big changes. Sound familiar? Yeah. In this sense, this is what's pretty remarkable about the American colonies. It does offer for the Europeans who settle here an opportunity to experiment and try things that would never be accepted in Europe at the time. And in that freedom and in that general ability to try new things out, and of course the English are not going to be happy with some of this eventually. Don't want to ruin that for you guys. We're going to get there, but they're able to try things out, and it leads to this kind of this experimentation, and it helps prove some principles right. Also leads to some people getting their ears cut off and sent back to England, but it's a long time ago. So break. All right. So, last one. Georgia. You guys love Georgia? Who loves Georgia? Raise your hand. Love Georgia. All right. Who likes Georgia? Who likes South Carolina more than Georgia? Who likes South Carolina more than Georgia? All right. That's cool. Either you don't or you're wise enough not to admit that in my class. All right. South Carolina. I've got a policy. I want to run for president. This is the only reason. I'm only going to do it for one day. My entire policy is this. I want to be president, and then I want to change the name of North Carolina just to Carolina, right? Just to Carolina. That way, there's the weird one over there called South Carolina. We're regular Carolina. What are they doing? I'm tired of people getting the Carolinas confused. People do that to me all the time. But you know who nobody ever gets confused? Virginia and West Virginia. You want to know why? Because when West Virginia left, Virginia was like, cool, you guys are West Virginia. We're still plain Virginia. All right? So that's my policy. All right? Vote for me. I will only serve one day. I will try that. It won't work, and I'll leave. Just kidding. Never vote for me for president. That's recorded. You can see that again. Unless you hate me. If you guys hate me, vote for me for president. All right? It's the worst job I can think of. So, Georgia. Georgia's the last of these colonies to be chartered by the English. 1732, it comes around. Again, experimentation. Here we go. So as the southern part of the Carolina colony is getting set up under this plantation system, it's producing wealth. From the south, you have Florida. And you guys know who was in Florida at this time? That's right, dirtbags, just like today. But what kind of dirtbags? Where are these dirtbags from?
Was it Spain?
Yes, that's right. That's right. Spain. Sorry to Florida. All right, I'm making fun of every state. Don't worry. I'll get there. So, yeah, so Spain's there. And the Spanish and the English, not exactly on good terms. Remember, I talked about mercantilism before? Like, people want to take it away if they can't. Spain have a stronger presence in the Western Hemisphere. So the Crown and the Carolina proprietors are a bit worried about this. So what are you going to do? Well, you've got this kind of hinterland between the two. And so the Crown gets the idea, we'll set up a colony in between there that could be a military buffer zone, basically. That's where this guy, James Oglethorpe, steps in. You guys driven past Fort Oglethorpe if you ever drive down to Atlanta? You guys driven past that? Yeah, it's named after this guy. This guy basically helped set up Georgia. Back in England at this time, the world is a very different place. All right, how many of you guys have ever not paid a bill and they keep calling you and texting you and calling you and texting you? You guys ever been behind on your bills and they start calling you and texting you, calling you and texting you? Oh, sorry, I forgot. A bunch of monarchs in here. Sorry, guys. Sorry, a bunch of princesses and princes in here. Sorry, guys. You're like, no, behind on a bill. All right, kids. Look, you will be one day. And if you haven't been, they will call you over and over and over again. Fortunate to say it's hasn't happened to me in a long time. Took a while, though. They will call you, and you'll go, this is the worst. You ever had your phone cut off or something? You ever had your phone cut off? Anybody? People ain't even, what I like about this is there's some people that go, they're honest. And then there's the people that just look at me like this. Like, I'm sorry, what did you say? I would hate to acknowledge this right here in front of everybody. It's okay. But if you do, if you have them calling you and bugging you, you're like, it's the worst. But let me tell you something. It's not the worst. Because it used to be that if you got behind and you owed some people some money, your credit score didn't just go down. They would put you in prison. How are you going to pay it off if you're in prison, man? You can't pay debts with honey buns, and honey buns are the currency of prisons. I know this. My brother was in prison for a while. He wanted them honey buns. All right, we sent him some money. We only sent him like $2 a week, but we try to help him get some honey buns. I don't know, man. Anyway, so these, what you have here is these debtors' prisons, and these are not bad people. These are not criminals, like in the sense that like they're not violent criminals. These might just be good people that were hard workers that had a bad year, bad crop, and couldn't pay back their debts. This guy Oglethorpe says, what if we gave these people a second chance and we turned the debtors criminal, or the people in the debtors prisons from the old world into the citizen soldiers in the new world? And that's the origin of Georgia. Is that this guy says, I will teach them how to actually be soldiers. They can essentially serve their debt. Instead of being in a prison, they'll be here. Now, this is amazing, all right? They have all types of religions that come in there. They actually like recruit people from all around the world. And this is early on. This only lasts for a little bit. But here's my favorite part, all right? Although there was a lot of tolerance in Georgia, 4 things were banned. They were like, slavery, Catholics, rum, and lawyers. You were like, no slavery, no lawyers? Yeah. I mean, it changed. But I like the way they were just like, also no lawyers, because F lawyers, all right? I haven't figured out why they did this, honestly. Like, I was trying to dig into it. I just recently found out about this. But the other ones, there are reasons. First of all, rum, getting drunk in the colony, that right there could cause a problem. Also, you know where most of the rum came from? You guys know what rum's made out of?
Isn't it cane sugar?
Yeah, it's cane sugar. That could potentially like lead to some questionable ties with the Caribbean, where the Spanish are. So you got that. Also, why? So there you go. Why no Catholics? Why no? It was just a Southern Baptist colony. Is that what y'all think? Y'all get that reference, don't you? I don't know where y'all from. I just always assume people at MTSU are kind of where I'm from, where you know that if you go to the Catholic church, they're like Southern Baptist. You go to Southern Baptist church, they're like Catholics. And I'm like, you guys are actually all pretty nice. I like all y'all guys. Why don't y'all talk to each other? But that's my role. I just like to joke about it. I love them all. So why no Catholics though? Too much kneeling and standing up?
Because it was the king's religion.
King of?
England.
So the King of England has a different faith, right? You have the Church of England, but who's Catholic?
Is it his wife?
No.
Who do we talk about?
Yes.
Spanish?
Yeah, the Spanish. So they're worried. They're like, we're a military buffer zone meant to protect against the Spanish, but like if they're Catholic, there may be connections there like that they have, and they could end up being spies. So that's the religious restriction there. There's even accounts of Jewish people moving there, and they're like fine with that. So this is a strategic thing. So we've gone through those. Now, finally, why no slavery? Anybody?
Is it because they might be afraid that they would turn on them if they were given the weapons needed for warfare?
Thank you, Bethany. Usually takes us a while to get to that one, but that's absolutely it. We sometimes, like the stories we hear about the South before when there was slavery, sometimes there's like some interesting things we don't say. Like, for example, these enslaved people, especially first generation, they have been stolen away from their homes. And if you're born into it, it ain't a whole lot better. But ultimately, those people, there's more enslaved people and it's going to be in the South than there are people living in the big house. You give them a gun, they just might want you dead. This is kind of the unspoken secret of the American South before the Civil War. The deep fear that people lived in. If these folks figured out how many of themselves there were, might not be good. That's why you keep them from reading, writing, and knowing much about where they are. It's all about keeping people uneducated because you're worried if they find out what's happening to them and where they are, it'd be bad. Big changes, big differences in these economies. The South, as I said, is going to rely heavily on rice, Virginia tobacco. As I told you before, work is brutal. Malaria, disease is rampant there. The weather is really harsh. Life expectancy is going to be much lower in the southern colonies than it is in the northern colonies from early on. And as I said, very little development of commercial or industrial economy. Because, especially in the Deep South, you're going to have a small number of people that have all of the wealth. If you understand an economy today, there's a lot of differences between now and back then. But one of the things is, if you're going to have a developed economy, you have to have a consumer class if you're going to have a market economy. Because if wealth isn't spread out, people can't buy extra cars. And if people have, like a couple of people have all the wealth, they only need so many things. They only need so many houses. They only need so many cars. So the consumer economy is usually much better off when you have wealth distributed. It is built into the system here that that's not going to happen. So you don't have many cities. Think about where the cities are on the West Coast, on the East Coast. In the 13 original colonies, if you think about the big cities, where are they? Like on the East Coast, we've talked about some of them.
Philadelphia.
Big cities on the East Coast. Anybody?
Rhode Island, Philadelphia. I mean, Rhode Island's a state. But...
Oh, Providence, yeah. Okay. So Philadelphia, yeah. What else?
Is New Jersey on the coast?
Yeah, it's a state, but it's got ports there. But what's the big one right there between New York and New Jersey? Right there on the border.
Trenton.
Trenton's down there. But what's the biggest city on the East Coast? The biggest city in America?
Richmond?
Oh, man. Richmond would love it that you said that. Today, what is the biggest city?
New York.
New York City. If you think, go from up to New England all the way down to the south of Georgia and ask yourselves, what are the big cities? Boston, New York, Baltimore, Philadelphia. You've got Providence. You've got some other cities there. I didn't name a single one that's in the South. Baltimore is the furthest south one. DC's only established about 1800, so it's not there at this point. It's still not that big. Cities happen where commerce happens. It's the reason you don't have big cities on the coast in the South. You guys think Charleston and Savannah? Nothing compared to the other ones I mentioned. It's a sign of a thriving economy. It's a sign of a diversified economy. Cities are where people work that don't produce food. If you're going to have people that specialize in things, you need wealth to be distributed, which is why, whereas in the South, you do not see much of a commercial development. This is going to go all the way up to the Civil War and actually even lead into today. You can see that the South was underdeveloped industrially for a long time. There's still legacy of that here. Now, you also have agriculture. The more you're heavily invested in it, the more you could lose everything, particularly if you have a plantation. On the other hand, the reason that these cities thrive in the North and the reason they're built up there is partially because of geography, but also because these Puritans and these other groups that come in, they're not going to be slaveholders. You're going to have small farms. You're going to have households. And what this means is you have more people living within a geographic proximity that have buying power. They're going to be bartering with each other. You have more extraction of timber for the lumber industry, of minerals that are found up there. You have far more people that aren't just either engaged in being human cargo in the eyes of everybody, or people that engaged in owning land and essentially overseeing them. If you guys are trying to set up if you guys own, I don't know, what's the store? You guys own Sears. Sorry about that. But if you own Sears, where are you going to set one up? You're going to set one up in a place where there's like 8 people that have a ton of money, but they're all really far away from each other. You're going to set one up in a place where you've got hundreds of people within a small, like reachable distance. It's obvious. And the more trade, the more people come in and out of ports, the more service industry there, the more lawyers you need, the more people that you need overseeing books. Like, I mean, by that, I mean like accounts. The cities thrive. And this has everything to do with the difference in the way these economies are set up. You also have the fact that, I mentioned this in the last class, but it's really important. In New England, where you have religious segments, right? And in the North, in Philadelphia, and places like they put a high premium on reading the Bible. And to read the Bible, you have to be literate. That means that in the cultures, they teach people how to read and write. So by the time you get to like the beginning of the 18th century, you have, by some accounts, a literacy rate in these colonies, which, let me tell you, the English still think of these as backwaters. These are undeveloped hick towns on the other side of the ocean, and you have literacy rates that by some accounts are higher than back in England. These things compound. The history follows you. And in all of this, you have a very different development going on. Now, I'll tell you, I'll end on this right here. 2 things. First of all, alcohol is absolutely crucial to people's lives there in a lot of different ways. And I actually found, Bethany, are you taking pictures of the slides? Okay, I post the slides with the lectures every time.
Yeah,
So,
I had like 2 more things to write, and I was like, oh no, he's going to change the slides. So I was going to try to take a picture just so I could finish writing it down.
oh yeah, but all right, you don't have to write down what's on the slides because I'm going to post them anyway.
Okay.
My advice to you guys, and I'm going to record a video on this afternoon and post it, but my advice to all of you is to follow what I'm saying and write down what I'm saying. Like I use this as a structure. And then when you get through with that, go back to the slides, check out the slides. If you understand all the points from the slides based on what you've written down, that means you've got it. If you don't, then you'll come back to me and know what to ask questions about. That way we make sure that we're answering. And also, if you're paying attention to what I'm saying as we go along, if I say something that confuses you, you'll catch it quicker and you can stop me and kind of say, hey, could you repeat that again? Cool. But I apologize. I've been meaning to get that video up. Turns out I crashed a video yesterday and had to re-record it. So alcohol matters. The link that was broken, by the way, to the Ed Cruz article has been fixed. It matters a lot. Has anyone read that yet? Has anyone read the Ed Cruz article? It's all right if you haven't. I mean, I just fixed it last night. I apologize for that. Like when they first, even the Puritans up north, even the super religious people, when they get their first batch of apples so that they can make cider out of it, they like believe God's shining grace down on them because the water has water is full of bacteria. And that matters. And we'll pick back up in the next lecture with the improvements in medical care and early medicine, all of that. That's a horrifying story that I can't wait to tell you guys about next time. Thank you all for being here. And let me know if you have any questions. Have a good weekend. Remember, no discussion sessions this week. They'll be next week on the Thursday and Friday then. So thank you guys. And I'll stick around if you guys have any questions. If you want to have a much better connection, go and run a hard line into your computer, right? So don't rely on Wi-Fi because Wi-Fi is a much lower signal. And if you get a bunch of people on Wi-Fi, it will eat it up. But if you're running straight out, like I got a 100-foot cable that I ran across my living room, under the rugs, under the couches, and plug in here so that I can make sure that I have better quality for you guys. So if that's an issue you're having, find a place you can do that. Right. It's weird because it feels like it's old timey. It's like plugging your cell phone into a jack in the wall. I get it, but it will make a huge difference.